So I guess there are some consequences of having a fairly rootless upbringing.
What did it do to you moving around? Norway, Newbury, and then to Scotland again and
Yeah,
back?
we went to I think I went to 5 different schools or something, which is, it's not a huge amount, but I think partially, I was thinking the other day that maybe this kind of lyrical fixation in a lot of our music, I tend to write a lot about families and community and kind of a sense of belonging and tradition and kind of culture and kind of rootedness, and just I really like the idea of people who can say, my family have lived here for generations, and they're really I really admire people who have a strong sense of like belonging in a place, probably because we moved around a lot, and so for me I don't really feel that. My mother grew up in the Caribbean, her father was in oil, my dad's family are kind of originally from Scotland, and then from northern England. They worked in mining and very kind of working class mining and in the mills, very kind of pretty tough kind of existence. But again, like our family is so scattered, there's no one place where my relatives all live. They live all over the place, and my father now lives in South Africa. My uncle lives in America. Our family are really spread far and wide. So I think to some degree, I've always enjoyed traveling. I've never really I don't have a thing where I desperately need to be in one place, and when we're touring I don't really get homesick. I guess maybe that's a hangover from the fact that I've moved around a lot. I travelled a lot when I finished school on my own in Central America and South America and Eastern Europe, and studied anthropology at university because I kind of had this from a young age, I always had this kind of fascination with cultural differences, and so I guess there are some consequences of having a fairly rootless upbringing, but nothing I can think of that's negative.
What does it feel if I say the word home to you? What sort of feeling do you get? What sort of images?
I feel like when I hear home, I have very nostalgic images that don't actually belong to me. I'll think of home as like somewhere comforting and warm and very kind of, and these kind of images of family, a nuclear family. My family, my parents had divorced when I was fairly young, and we don't have like a very kind of nuclear rooted family. But I still have visions of that when I think of home. I still think of the conventional meaning of home, even though it's not something that I necessarily had as a child. But now, when I first went to university, I think that's the first time I began to think of a city as like when I moved to Bristol and the West Country. It's quite a small city. You can stand on the hill in the centre of Bristol and see most of the city around. It's not. You can feel very quickly. I felt like I knew my way around. I felt at home there. That was the first time I wasn't living with one of my parents, and I felt like I think for the first time I can create my own kind of home. And I lived there for 3 years when I did my degree. And so I think that was the first time, and all of us were in the same position, all of the students, we're all first time away from home. And to me that felt, I even began to spend holidays outside of university there, it just felt I felt very comfortable there from the start, and so I guess that was the first time I considered it to be home.
And now?
Now London. I moved to London 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I started my second degree, my medical degree. And then that's where the band was formed. We initially all lived together for the first 2 years of being in a band. We all lived in a 2-bedroom house, the 5 of us. I lived on a mattress on the floor in the dining room. Scott, the bassist, lived on the sofa. Matt and John had their own rooms, and Will lived on the practice room in the cellar on the floor. But that was, again, like a very kind of, there was a lot of camaraderie, and when we were touring so much, it did feel like coming home when you came back to the house. More recently, I've moved out, and Will's moved out, and Matt's moved out, because having 5 people living in a 2-bedroom house isn't that practical. So now I live in a flat with 2 other people who I don't really know that well, but they're not heavily involved in music, so it's kind of nice to have and I don't feel like an obligation to constantly be sociable. When we come off tour, I can retire to my room for a few days and just watch junk on TV and drink tea and do nothing and recover. And I think that's kind of important, to have my own kind of space there.
And you all have a background in hardcore and post-punk.